Welcome to Moonlit Inc. BL. A BL story written under moonlight. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Midnight Executive. The fluorescent lights of the 42nd floor hummed with a sterile, buzzing energy that mimicked the caffeine-induced vibration in Jason Cole's veins. It was 10:47 p.m. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass of Kane Enterprises, the city of Seattle was a blurred tapestry of rain and neon, but inside, the air was unnervingly still. Jason adjusted his glasses, his thumbs smoothing over a stack of acquisition reports. At 28, he'd expected his career to involve more strategic consulting and less wondering if my boss is a vampire. He looked toward the double mahogany doors at the end of the hall. Sefan Kane's office. He's in there, Jason thought, a familiar prickle of heat rising to his neck. Probably reading a 500-page brief in total darkness. Sefan Kane was a ghost in a bespoke suit. He never arrived before 6 p.m. He never joined the team for power lunches. He was a man of shadows, silence, and a brilliance that felt almost predatory. He was also, inconveniently, the most beautiful man Jason had ever seen, possessing a bone structure that looked carved from marble and skin that seemed to glow under the moon. Jason gathered the files and approached the door. He knocked, the sound echoing too loudly in the empty office. Enter. The voice was like velvet dragged over gravel, low, resonant, and impossibly smooth. Jason pushed the door open. As expected, the office was dim, lit only by a single green-shaded banker's lamp on the massive obsidian desk. Sefan was silhouetted against the window, his back to the room. He was 35, at least on paper, but he carried a stillness that felt heavy, like the weight of centuries. The Q3 projections, Mr. Kane, Jason said, his voice steadier than he felt. I've highlighted the discrepancies in the logistics sector. Sefan turned. The lamp caught his eyes, those startling, unique golden eyes that always seemed to see through Jason's skin and straight into his pulse. You're still here, Jason, Sefan remarked. It wasn't a question. He moved toward the desk, his gait fluid and silent. He didn't walk, he glided. The deadline is tomorrow morning, sir. I didn't want to leave you unsupported. Sefan stopped just a foot away. Jason could smell him, not the scent of coffee or sweat that clung to other executives, but something like sandalwood, rain, and an underlying metallic sharpness that made Jason's heart skip. Your dedication is noted, Sefan said softly. He reached out, his long, pale fingers brushing against the edge of the folder Jason held. Jason's breath hitched. God, he's cold, he thought, feeling the chill radiating off Sefan's skin even through the paper. Is the AC really up that high? Sefan's gaze didn't go to the files. It lingered on the side of Jason's neck, where a vein pulsed rapidly. Sefan's golden eyes darkened, the amber centers expanding as if searching for light. He inhaled deeply, a sharp, hungry sound. You should go home, Jason, Sefan said, his voice suddenly tighter, more strained. The air is getting thick in here. I'm fine, really, Jason protested, stepping closer, driven by a sudden, irrational urge to be nearer to that coldness. I can stay another hour to help with the Go, Sefan commanded. For a split second, Jason saw a flicker of something terrifying in those golden depths, a flash of primal hunger that made his lizard brain scream run. But his heart, traitorous and pounding, felt a magnetic pull. I'll see you tomorrow night, then, Jason whispered. As he backed out of the room, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just an assistant to a CEO. He was a moth fluttering around a flame that didn't burn, it froze. And he was beginning to realize he didn't mind the cold at all. Behind him, in the shadows of the office, Sefan Kane gripped the edge of his desk so hard the wood groaned. He closed his eyes, trying to drown out the rhythmic, intoxicating thump-thump of Jason's heart echoing in his ears. Too sweet, Sefan whispered to the empty room, his eyes snapping open, now tinged with a faint, dangerous rim of red. He smells far too sweet. Chapter 2, cold coffee and cold skin. The atmosphere at Kane Enterprises changed after midnight. The daytime bustle of frantic interns and ringing phones was replaced by a heavy, velvet silence that seemed to swallow sound. For Jason, the office became a different world, a world where the only two people who existed were himself and the man behind the obsidian desk. It was 1:15 a.m., and the thermostat in the office had dropped to a crisp 16 degrees Celsius. Jason shivered, pulling his cardigan tighter. Sefan's preference for the cold was legendary, but tonight it felt personal, as if the building itself were exhaling frost. Jason walked toward the executive suite, balancing a tray. On it sat a steaming black coffee for himself and a bottle of high-end mineral water for Sefan. He never drinks the coffee, Jason mused, his mind looping back to the oddities of the past week. He never eats the catered salmon. He just sits there, like a statue waiting for the sun to go down. He knocked and entered. The office was bathed in the pale, silvery glow of the moon. Sefan was standing by the window again, his silhouette sharp and regal. "Your water, Mr. Kane," Jason said. Sefan turned. The moonlight hit his face, making his pale skin look like polished alabaster. His golden eyes seemed to catch the light, glowing with an inner luminescence that felt predatory. "Set it down, Jason. You look tired." "I'm fine," Jason lied, though his head felt heavy. He walked to the desk, but as he went to set the tray down, his foot caught on the edge of the plush rug. The tray tilted dangerously. "Careful." Before Jason could even blink, Sefan was there. It was impossible. Sefan had been 10 feet away by the window, but in the space of a heartbeat, he was standing directly in front of Jason, his hand steadying the tray with a grip like iron. Jason froze. The proximity was overwhelming. He could see the individual lashes framing those amber eyes, the perfect curve of Sefan's lips, and the way his tailored suit sat flawlessly on his broad shoulders. "Thank you," Jason whispered, his breath hitching. Sefan didn't pull away. His hand stayed on the tray, his fingers inches from Jason's. Driven by a bold, caffeinated impulse, Jason reached out, his skin brushing against the back of Sefan's hand. He recoiled internally, though he kept his hand there. "He's freezing." It wasn't just the cold of a drafty room, it was the cold of a stone floor in winter. There was no pulse in the wrist beneath Jason's fingertips. No warmth of blood. Sefan's eyes darkened. A low, vibrating hum, almost like a growl, started in his chest. "Your skin," Jason murmured, his inner monologue screaming at him to stop even as his mouth kept moving. "You're freezing, Sefan. Are you ill?" Sefan's gaze dropped to Jason's lips. The air between them grew thick, charged with a tension that felt like static electricity before a storm. "I am never ill, Jason," Sefan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, silky octave. "I am simply different." He pulled his hand away abruptly, the sudden loss of contact leaving Jason feeling strangely abandoned. Sefan turned his back, his posture stiffening. "A delivery arrived for me downstairs," Sefan said, his tone suddenly clipped and professional. "A courier from the Helsing Medical Group. It's marked as medical perishables. Go fetch it. Do not open it. Do not leave it in the sun." Jason blinked, the romantic tension shattering into confusion. "Medical perishables? Is everything all right?" "Just do as I ask, Jason," Sefan snapped, his eyes flashing a brief, warning spark of orange. Jason nodded quickly and retreated. As he walked toward the elevator, his mind was racing. Cold skin. No food. Hyperspeed. And now, medical perishables delivered in the dead of night. He thought about Sefan's eyes, the way they looked at his neck earlier. He thought about the lack of a heartbeat. "I'm working for a ghost," Jason thought, a nervous laugh bubbling in his throat. Or something much, much hungrier. Chapter 3, The Black Market Secret. The basement loading dock of Kane Enterprises felt like a concrete tomb at 2 a.m. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust and damp pavement. Jason stood shivering by the freight elevator, clutching a clipboard like a shield. A nondescript black van pulled in, its headlights cutting through the gloom like the eyes of a deep-sea predator. A man in a heavy tactical vest hopped out, carrying a reinforced, insulated silver cooler. He didn't look like a medical professional, he looked like someone who got paid to keep his mouth shut. "Delivery for Kane," the man grunted, his breath misting in the air. "I'm his assistant, Jason Cole." "I'll take it," Jason said, reaching for the handle. The courier hesitated, eyeing Jason's slim frame and office attire. "Careful, kid. This stuff is sensitive. Keep it on ice, or it spoils and smells like a slaughterhouse." Slaughterhouse? Jason's stomach did a nervous flip as he signed the digital pad. As the van roared away, Jason stood alone with the cooler. It was surprisingly heavy. He knew he should just will it up to the 42nd floor and forget about it, but the curiosity that had been simmering in his gut for weeks finally boiled over. Sefan's cold skin, the midnight schedule, the lack of a pulse, it all pointed to a conclusion Jason was too terrified to name. Just one look, he told himself. Maybe it's just rare insulin. Or some experimental stem cell treatment. He knelt on the cold concrete and flicked the latches. They popped with a sharp, metallic clack. He peeled back the thick foam insulation. Inside were several thick, plastic pouches filled with a viscous, crimson-black liquid. There were no hospital logos, no Red Cross symbols, only handwritten labels in a jagged, hurried script, type Opus, batch number 902. Fresh cured. Jason's breath hitched. This wasn't medical perishables. This was blood. And based on the lack of official paperwork and the way it was packed, it wasn't coming from a blood drive. It was black market. He's drinking it, Jason thought, his mind reeling. My boss isn't sick. He's feeding. The realization didn't bring the sheer terror he expected. Instead, it brought a strange, dizzying clarity. The midnight meetings, the 16 degrees Celsius office, it wasn't a quirk, it was survival. "I told you not to open it, Jason." The voice didn't come from the elevator. It came from the shadows behind him. Jason jumped, nearly knocking the cooler over. Sefan was standing in the darkness of the loading bay, his silhouette long and menacing. He stepped into the light, and for the first time, he looked truly haggard. His skin was paler than usual, almost translucent, and his golden eyes were rimmed with a faint, burning orange. I'm sorry, sir. The courier said it was sensitive, and you let your curiosity get the better of you," Sefan finished, his voice a low growl. He moved forward, his movements jerky, lacking his usual feline grace. He looked at the blood bags with an expression of profound loathing, and desperate, agonizing hunger. "Is this why you don't eat?" Jason whispered, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Is this what you are?" Sefan stopped a few feet away, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists at his sides. "I am a relic, Jason. A monster playing at being a businessman. This," he gestured to the cooler with a sneer, "is my shame. Illegally acquired, filtered, and stale. It tastes like copper and dust, but it keeps the beast quiet." Jason looked from the blood to Sefan. He saw the way Sefan's throat worked as he swallowed hard, the way his nostrils flared at the faint scent of the bags. He looked less like a powerful CEO and more like a man starving in a desert. "You're shaking," Jason noted softly, surprised by the lack of fear in his own voice. "I haven't fed in 3 days, Sefan admitted, his voice cracking. "The shipment was delayed. Now, take that cooler to my private lounge. Immediately. Before I forget that you are my employee and not my dinner." Jason nodded, his mind a whirlwind of empathy and dark fascination. As he pushed the heavy cooler toward the elevator, he felt Sefan's predatory gaze burning into his back. He knew he should quit. He should run. But as the elevator doors closed, Jason caught a glimpse of Sefan's eyes. They weren't just hungry, they were lonely. Chapter 4, A Slip of the Blade. The air in Sefan's penthouse was different from the office. While the skyscraper was all glass and cold chrome, the penthouse felt like a cathedral dedicated to a forgotten century. Heavy velvet drapes muffled the sound of the Seattle rain, and the scent of old parchment and expensive sandalwood hung thick in the air. It was nearly 3 a.m. Sefan sat at a sprawling mahogany table, hunched over a laptop that looked out of place against the antique backdrop. He looked weary, his skin so pale it was almost translucent, reflecting the blue light of the screen. "You look like you're fading, Sefan," Jason said softly, stepping into the kitchen area that joined the study. He had stopped using Mr. Kane when they were alone. After seeing the blood bags in the basement, the corporate facade felt like a thin, ridiculous veil. "The delivery was lackluster," Sefan replied, his voice a dry rasp. "Black market blood is often filtered with chemicals to preserve it. It's like drinking bitter ash. It sustains the body, but it does nothing for the soul." Jason felt a strange pang of sympathy. He looked at the bowl of fresh fruit on the counter, vibrant apples, pears, and blood-red oranges. A human snack for a human assistant. "You should rest. I'll finish the cross-referencing for the merger." "I don't rest, Jason. I merely endure the hours until the sun retreats again." Jason picked up a small, silver paring knife. He began to peel a pear, the blade slicing through the skin with a rhythmic shick. His mind was wandering, drifting to the way Sefan's golden eyes had lingered on his throat earlier that evening. He's 500 years old, Jason thought, his heart thumping a little faster. He's seen empires fall, and here he is, worrying about a corporate merger with a 28-year-old assistant. "Jason," Sefan called out, his voice suddenly sharp. "Your heart. It's racing. Is something wrong?" "I'm fine, just." Slice. The knife, slick with pear juice, slipped. The silver blade bit deep into the pad of Jason's left thumb. "Ah, damn it," Jason hissed, pulling his hand back. In the quiet of the penthouse, the sound of the first drop of blood hitting the hardwood floor was like a gunshot. The air in the room shifted instantly. The temperature seemed to plummet another 10 degrees. Jason looked up, his thumb pressed against his palm, but it was too late. The iron-rich scent of fresh, warm, living blood hit the air, O-negative, potent and pure. Sefan was no longer at the laptop. He moved with a speed that defied physics, a blur of shadow and silk. Before Jason could even gasp, Sefan was in the kitchen, pinning Jason back against the marble countertop. "Sefan." Jason gasped. Sefan's face was transformed. The refined CEO was gone. His bone structure seemed sharper, more predatory. But it was his eyes that froze the breath in Jason's lungs. The beautiful, sunset gold had been swallowed by a violent, pulsing crimson. The pupils were blown wide, fixed on the red smear on Jason's hand. "Fresh," Sefan whispered, the word hitching in his throat. "So, vibrant. I can hear it, Jason. I can hear it singing in your veins." Sefan grabbed Jason's wrist. His grip wasn't just firm, it was crushing. His skin was no longer just cold, it felt like ice-wrapped steel. He pulled Jason's hand toward his face, his nostrils flaring as he inhaled the steam rising from the wound. "I should be screaming," Jason's inner monologue whispered, but his body was paralyzed by a terrifying, electric heat. "He's going to kill me. He's going to drain me dry right here on the kitchen floor." Sefan's lips parted, revealing fangs that glinted like polished ivory under the recessed lights. He leaned down, his tongue flicking out to catch a stray drop of blood on Jason's wrist. Jason let out a shaky moan, his knees buckling. "Sefan, please." The sound of his name seemed to strike Sefan like a physical blow. The vampire froze, his face inches from the open cut. His eyes flickered, red to gold, then back to a tortured, bleeding scarlet. A low, agonized growl tore from his chest, not of hunger, but of a man fighting his own soul. "Run," Sefan snarled, his voice distorted, monstrous. "Sefan, I." "Run, Jason." Sefan shoved Jason away with enough force to send him stumbling into the living area. Sefan turned his back, his hands gripping the marble counter so hard the stone began to spiderweb with cracks. "If you stay," Sefan choked out, his shoulders heaving, "there will be nothing left of you by morning. Go. Lock the door. Never come back." Jason stood in the center of the room, his thumb throbbing, his heart loud enough to fill the silence. He looked at the man, the monster, who was trembling with the effort of not hurting him. He saw the monster's shame, and he saw the man's hunger. He didn't run. He wrapped a paper towel around his finger, his eyes never leaving Sefan's shaking frame. He saved me from himself, Jason realized, a dangerous, dark thrill racing through him. He wants me. And God help me, I think I want him to want me. Jason backed toward the door, not out of fear, but because he knew that tonight, the beast had won the battle, but the war for his heart had just begun. Chapter 5, The Predator's Regret. The morning didn't bring the usual relief of sunlight. For Jason, the sun was just a reminder of the cold, dark vacuum Sefan Kane had left in that penthouse. He hadn't slept. His thumb, neatly bandaged now, throbbed with a rhythmic heat that felt like a tether pulling him back to the 42nd floor. When the elevator doors slid open at 6 p.m., the start of the vampire shift, the office felt like a funeral parlor. The air was heavy, the silence jagged. Jason walked toward the mahogany doors. He didn't knock. He pushed them open. Sefan was sitting behind his desk, perfectly composed, his suit charcoal gray and his hair swept back without a single strand out of place. But his golden eyes were dull, like tarnished coins, and his skin had a gray, waxen tint. He didn't look up from the tablet in his hand. "There is a severance package on the desk, Jason," Sefan said. His voice was hollow, stripped of its velvet warmth. 6 months' salary, a glowing recommendation to any firm in the city, and a non-disclosure agreement. "Sign it and leave." Jason froze. He looked at the thick envelope. "He's throwing me away. Like a broken tool. Or a half-eaten meal." "I'm not signing that," Jason said, his voice cracking but firm. Sefan finally looked up. The intensity in his gaze was enough to make Jason's knees weak. "You saw what I am last night. I am not a man with a condition, Jason. I am a predator. I was seconds away from tearing your throat out for a mouthful of salt and iron." Sefan stood, his movements slow and agonizingly deliberate. He walked around the desk, stopping just outside Jason's personal space. The cold radiating from him was a physical wall. "Do you know how long it's been since I tasted living blood?" Sefan whispered, leaning in until Jason could see the faint, silvery scars on his neck from centuries of battles Jason couldn't imagine. 500 years of discipline. 500 years of pretending to be civilized. And one drop of your blood turned me into a starving animal. He's terrified, Jason realized. The thought hit him with the force of a tidal wave. He isn't disgusted by me. He's disgusted by how much he wants me. "I'm not a victim, Sefan," Jason countered, stepping forward, closing the gap. He could smell the sandalwood again, mixed with the faint, ozonic scent of the storm outside. "I saw you fight it. You could have taken what you wanted, but you pushed me away. You saved me. I shouldn't have to save you from myself." Sefan roared, his voice echoing off the glass walls. For a flash, his eyes flickered a violent, desperate orange. "I am a monster, Jason. I have killed kings. I have watched civilizations crumble into dust while I stayed exactly the same. You are a heartbeat in the dark. You are a candle flame in a hurricane. I will outlive you, and if I don't kill you first, I will have to watch you wither and die while I remain, this." Jason reached out. It was the bravest thing he'd ever done. He laid his hand, the bandaged one, directly onto Sefan's chest, right where a heart should have been beating. Sefan flinched as if burned. "Then let me be your candle," Jason whispered. "Stop drinking that dusty, black market filth and trying to fire me because you're scared of a little heat. I'm not leaving. You need an assistant. And judging by how much you're shaking, you need a friend." Sefan looked down at Jason's hand. He could feel the warmth of Jason's palm through his silk shirt. It was agonizing. It was beautiful. For the first time in centuries, Sefan Kane felt a different kind of hunger, one that had nothing to do with blood. "You are a fool, Jason Cole," Sefan breathed, his golden eyes shimmering with a sudden, tragic moisture. "Maybe," Jason smiled weakly, his heart thumping a frantic, brave rhythm against Sefan's cold chest. "But I'm a fool who knows his boss's secrets. And I'm staying." Sefan didn't move. He didn't speak. But he didn't pull away. In the quiet of the office, the predator and the prey stood in a fragile, impossible truce, while the city lights twinkled like distant, uncaring stars. Chapter 6, The Contractual Agreement. The silence in the office was no longer the silence of a tomb, it was the silence of a negotiation. Sefan had retreated to his high-backed leather chair, the shadows of the room pooling around him like a protective cloak. Jason stood on the other side of the obsidian desk, his hands still tingling from the brief contact with Sefan's chest. "If you stay," Sefan began, his voice regaining its sharp, executive edge, "there are rules. This is no longer a standard employment contract, Jason. You are entering a world that would turn your hair white if you saw it in the light of day." Jason pulled up a chair and sat. He didn't wait to be asked. "I've already seen you turn into a crimson-eyed shadow in a penthouse kitchen, Sefan. I think I can handle the fine print." Sefan leaned forward, the green banker's lamp casting long, jagged shadows across his sharp features. "Rule 1, you never enter my office without announcing yourself. My instincts are faster than my reason. If I am startled, I may react before I recognize your face." Jason nodded, his throat dry. "A predator's reflex." "Understood." "Rule 2, Sefan continued, his golden eyes narrowing. "You will not mention the black market deliveries to anyone. There are entities, other creatures, as you might call them, who would use my reliance on synthetic and illegally sourced blood as a weakness. My position in the corporate world is a shield for our kind. If the shield cracks, we all burn." Jason felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "There are others. Like you. More than you can imagine. Some are far less civilized than I," Sefan said darkly. He paused, his gaze dropping to the white bandage on Jason's thumb. "Rule 3, you will never again offer me your blood. Last night was a lapse. A moment of weakness. It cannot happen again. The taste of living blood is an addiction I have spent 5 centuries breaking. If I start again, I will not be able to stop until you are a husk." Jason looked at his thumb. He remembered the heat of Sefan's tongue, the terrifyingly beautiful way Sefan had looked at him. "He's scared he'll love the taste too much," Jason thought. "Or that he'll love me. And what do I get?" Jason asked, his voice bolder than he felt. "Besides a front-row seat to the supernatural." Sefan's lips quirked into the ghost of a smile, a rare, devastatingly handsome expression. "Protection. My name carries weight in the shadows. No harm will come to you so long as you are under my roof. And," he leaned in closer, "a salary that will allow you to retire before you're 35. Since I intend to keep you very, very busy." "Is that a threat or a promise, Mr. Kane?" Jason joked, though his heart was hammering. "It is a reality," Sefan replied. He reached into his desk and pulled out a fountain pen, sliding a new, revised contract across the desk. It wasn't written in blood, Sefan was too much of a gentleman for that, but the ink was a deep, dark red. As Jason reached for the pen, their fingers brushed. This time, Sefan didn't flinch. He let the contact linger. His skin was still cold, but Jason noticed a faint tremor in the vampire's hand. "He's lonely," Jason's inner monologue whispered. 500 years of rules and black market bags. He's not looking for an assistant. He's looking for a reason to stay human. "I accept the terms," Jason said, signing his name in a firm, elegant script. "Good," Sefan whispered, his eyes glowing with a soft, sunset amber. "Then let us get back to work, Jason. We have a merger to finish before the sun rises." The rest of the night was spent in a strange, domestic bliss. They worked side by side, Jason typing and Sefan dictating. To anyone watching through the windows, they looked like two dedicated businessmen. But every time their eyes met, or their hands bumped over a shared file, the air crackled with the secret they both held, a bond forged in ice and sealed with the promise of blood. Chapter 7, The Climax, The Offering. The storm outside was no longer a typical Seattle drizzle, it was a horizontal deluge that rattled the reinforced glass of the penthouse. But the storm inside was far worse. Sefan was slumped on the floor against the velvet sofa, his expensive silk shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing skin that had turned a sickly, translucent gray, like old parchment left in the rain. The rival faction had struck at twilight, intercepting the black market courier. The shipment was gone, and with it, Sefan's last hope for sustenance. "Sefan, look at me," Jason pleaded, kneeling on the rug beside him. Sefan's head rolled back. His eyes were no longer golden. They were a terrifying, solid crimson, vibrating with a frantic, rhythmic pulse. His fangs were fully extended, resting against his lower lip, and a thin line of dark, dried ichor tracked down his chin. "Get out!" Sefan gasped, his voice a distorted, guttural rasp that sounded like stone grinding on stone. "The hunger, it's not a choice anymore, Jason. It's a parasite. It's eating me from the inside." "I'm not leaving you to starve," Jason snapped, his fear finally being overtaken by a fierce, protective anger. "You're dying. You're fading right in front of me." "I am already dead," Sefan hissed, his claws digging into the mahogany floorboards, leaving deep, jagged gouges. "If I take from you, I lose the last piece of man I have left. I won't. I won't make you a feast." Jason looked at the man he had grown to love, not despite the monster, but alongside it. He saw the centuries of loneliness, the pride that was now crumbling under the weight of an ancient, biological need. "He'd rather die than hurt me," Jason thought, his chest aching. "He's been protecting me since the day I walked into his office. Now it's my turn." Jason reached out and gripped Sefan's face, forcing those bleeding red eyes to meet his. "Listen to me, Sefan Kane. This isn't a lapse. This isn't a mistake. This is a gift. I am giving this to you." With a steady hand, Jason reached for the top button of his own shirt. Then the second. Then the third. He pushed the fabric aside, exposing the pale, vulnerable line of his throat. The heat of his body radiated into the freezing room, a beacon of life in a house of shadows. "No." Sefan whimpered, but his nostrils flared. He could hear it, the frantic, inviting drumbeat of Jason's carotid artery. To a starving vampire, it was the sound of a symphony. "Sefan," Jason whispered, leaning closer until his warm skin brushed against Sefan's icy lips. "Take it. Live. For me." A low, broken sob escaped Sefan's throat. The executive was gone. The vampire was all that remained. He lunged, his movements a blur of desperation. He didn't bite, not at first. He pressed his face into Jason's neck, inhaling the intoxicating scent of life and O-negative warmth. Then, the sting. Jason gasped, his back arching as Sefan's fangs pierced the skin. It wasn't the sharp, clinical pain he expected. It was a searing, electric heat that flooded his nervous system, a strange, aphrodisiacal rush that made the world tilt on its axis. He felt Sefan's hands grip his waist, pulling him flush against the vampire's cold body. The sound of Sefan drinking, the heavy, rhythmic swallows, vibrated through Jason's own bones. It's too much, Jason thought, his vision blurring into soft, white sparks. It's everything. As his blood flowed into Sefan, he felt the vampire's body change. The rigid, frozen muscles began to soften. The deathly chill of Sefan's skin began to absorb Jason's warmth. They were becoming one, a closed circuit of life and death, an ancient ritual performed in a modern penthouse. Sefan's mind, previously a screaming void of hunger, suddenly flooded with Jason. He felt Jason's courage, his stubborn loyalty, and the terrifyingly pure love that had driven him to this moment. The copper and dust of the black market was forgotten, replaced by a flavor so rich and sweet it tasted like sunlight and honey. Sefan pulled back just as Jason's head began to swim. He licked the wounds clean, his saliva containing an ancient enzyme that sealed the punctures instantly. Sefan's eyes were no longer red. They were a brilliant, burning gold, clearer and more vibrant than Jason had ever seen them. Color had returned to his cheeks. He looked like a god reborn. Jason, Sefan whispered, his voice back to its velvet perfection, but now laced with an unbearable tenderness. He cradled Jason's head, his touch no longer a threat. You shouldn't have. You have no idea what you've done. I saved my boss, Jason murmured, a weak but triumphant smile playing on his lips as he slumped into Sefan's arms. I think that's, in my job description. Sefan held him tight, pressing a kiss to Jason's forehead. The contract was no longer just paper and ink. It was written in the blood that now bound them together, eternal and unbreakable. Chapter 8, Eternal Partners. The executive floor of Kane Enterprises was bathed in the soft, blue-gray light of a pre-dawn Seattle sky. It had been 1 month since the night in the penthouse, the night the contract between Jason and Sefan had shifted from professional loyalty to something ancient and soul-deep. Jason sat at his desk, but he wasn't typing. He was watching the reflection in the glass. Sefan was standing behind him, his hands resting lightly on Jason's shoulders. The coldness was still there, but it no longer felt like the chill of a grave, it felt like the refreshing coolness of a mountain spring. You're distracted, Jason, Sefan murmured, his voice a rich, melodic hum against Jason's ear. Just thinking about the board meeting, Jason lied, leaning back into the vampire's touch. And how much they'd lose their minds if they knew their CEO was currently being powered by his assistant's morning O-negative. Sefan's grip tightened slightly, a gesture of possessive affection. Since the offering, Sefan had changed. He moved with a renewed vitality, his skin held a healthy, porcelain luster, and his golden eyes glowed with a constant, satisfied warmth. He no longer looked like a man enduring a curse, he looked like a man who had finally found his son. The board is irrelevant, Sefan said, gliding around the desk to face him. He looked down at Jason, his expression softening into something devastatingly tender. We have stabilized the supply lines. The rival factions know you are under my protection. You are the heartbeat of this company, Jason. Quite literally. Jason looked down at the faint, silver marks on his neck, mostly hidden by his dress shirt. They didn't hurt, they felt like a secret brand of belonging. I used to be afraid of the dark, Jason thought, his inner monologue marveling at the shift. Now, I'm the only one who truly knows what lives in it. And I've never felt safer. What happens now, Sefan? Jason asked, his voice low. I'm 28. You're significantly older. In 50 years, I'll be a memory, and you'll still be standing here in a three-piece suit. Sefan knelt beside Jason's chair, taking Jason's hand in his. The juxtaposition was striking, Jason's warm, tan skin against Sefan's marble-white fingers. 50 years is a heartbeat to me, Sefan admitted, his golden eyes shimmering with a trace of ancient sorrow. But I have spent 5 centuries waiting for a soul like yours. I will not let time be our enemy. We will find a way. Whether it is the dark gift, when you are ready, or simply making every second of your mortal life worth 1,000 years of my solitude. I am yours. Jason felt a lump form in his throat. He reached out, tracing the sharp line of Sefan's jaw. The dark gift? You'd really do that? Make me like you? Only if you ask, Sefan whispered, kissing Jason's palm. But for now, I find I quite enjoy the warmth of your humanity. It reminds me that I am alive. A soft chime echoed through the office, the 6 a.m. alarm. The sun would be cresting the horizon soon. It was time for Sefan to retreat to the shadows of his private quarters, and for Jason to take the reins of the daytime world. The sun is coming up, Jason noted, standing up. Sefan stood with him, his silhouette framed by the glowing sky. Then I shall leave my empire in your capable hands, Mr. Cole. I'll see you at sunset, Mr. Kane, Jason teased, adjusting Sefan's silk tie one last time. Sefan leaned in, a slow, lingering kiss that tasted of shadows and promises. When he pulled away, his eyes flashed a playful, sunset orange. Don't be late for our midnight meeting, Jason. I find I've developed a very specific hunger for your company. As Sefan disappeared into the darkened private lounge, Jason turned toward the window. The first rays of the sun hit the glass, but he didn't blink. He watched the city wake up, knowing that while the rest of the world feared the monsters under the bed, he was in love with the one in the corner office. The corporate ladder was a long climb, but when you're partnered with a creature of the night, the view from the top is eternal. Epilogue, the eternal merger. 50 years later. Location, London, United Kingdom. The fog rolled off the Thames, thick and white, obscuring the modern skyline of London until only the jagged shard of the Shard and the glowing face of Big Ben remained. In a penthouse overlooking the river, the air was chilled to a precise 15 degrees Celsius, a temperature that once made Jason Cole shiver, but now felt like a comfortable embrace. Jason stood by the window, swirling a crystal glass filled with a vintage that never saw a vineyard. He looked exactly as he had the day he left Seattle, 28, lean, and sharp-featured. But the glasses were gone, his vision was now keen enough to count the droplets of mist on the glass, and the frantic, nervous energy of a human assistant had been replaced by the predatory stillness of a king. A pair of familiar, ice-cold hands slid around his waist. The London market is far more aggressive than Seattle was, Sefan's voice purred against the shell of Jason's ear. It was the same velvet rasp, unchanged by the half-century that had passed. You handled the board like you were born for it. Jason leaned back into Sefan's chest, a smirk playing on his lips. I had a very demanding teacher. Besides, it's easier to win an argument when you can hear the chairman's heart skip a beat every time you look at him. Sefan chuckled, the sound vibrating through Jason's back. He turned Jason around, his golden eyes glowing with a soft, eternal warmth. In this new city, they weren't CEO and assistant. They were partners, equal in power, tethered by a bond that had been sealed in blood decades ago. Do you miss it? Sefan asked softly, his thumb tracing the line of Jason's jaw. The sun? The coffee? The heartbeat? Jason looked down at Sefan's hand, as pale as his own now. He remembered the heat of his mortal life, the frantic ticking of the clock, and the fear of fading away. Then he looked into the golden depths of the man who had given him the world in exchange for his mortality. I don't miss the sun, Jason whispered, reaching up to adjust Sefan's silk tie, a habit he refused to break. I have the stars now. And I have you. Sefan's eyes flickered, a brief flash of crimson sparked by affection rather than hunger. He leaned down, kissing Jason with a slow, deliberate passion that tasted of cold silk and forever. Outside, the sun began to peek over the horizon, a signal for the world to wake up. But inside the penthouse, the day was just beginning for the two men who had conquered time itself. Come, Jason, Sefan said, leading him toward the darkened sanctuary of their chambers. The markets are closed, and the night has ended. But our meeting is far from over. Jason followed, the shadows closing around them like a bespoke suit. They were no longer running from the dark, they owned it. The end.